You should eat sponges. Then you won't have to go to the bathroom either, and you can keep drinking.
Well, but then you got to pass them.
Yeah, but that takes hours. That's like 6 hours you bought yourself.
1980s Now.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of 1980s Now, a weekly examination of the importance of 1980s pop culture and its influence today. My name's Will, and joining me, as always, are my co-hosts and friends, Kat and John. Hey, guys.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
Another year, and we're still talking about the 1980s.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But, again, if you're new to joining us, look, I think our thesis is that nostalgia alone does not account for the staying power of 1980s. Something more. We'll talk about those things today, because on today's show, we're going to touch upon current news stories related to 1980s media and those things we love from our childhood, including the 80s related films that ranked among the top movies released in 2024.
Yeah, nice.
Thanks to, we'll talk about this in a moment, but it's thanks to Rick Parker, our buddy Rick Parker.
Rick Parker.
The deadly, or a deadly, I guess, because maybe there's more than one, I don't know. Whatever article you choose, A or the deadly search for Bigfoot.
Mm-hmm.
See if we can deter John at all from... Or maybe something else. Motivate John to prepare properly.
That is a lesson to be learned, yes.
Yeah.
Hollywood has found its Skeletor. And boy, oh boy. Bummed out about that. There's a new dark Pac-Man game that may seem familiar to you. It looks like we might be getting... there may be a Labyrinth reboot coming from the Nosferatu director. So we've been talking about a reboot for this film for some time, but now it looks like we've got a different director at the helm. Mm-hmm. And finally, we're going to talk about an 80s movie practice that, at least according to Screen Rant, is one that is still useful today. Now, even for us, I think what they're talking about may be a stretch tying these two things together. But our show is 1980s Now.
Yes.
It's all about stretches here. Whatever we can cram into the category of 1980s, we're going to do it. And by golly, if Screen Rant wants to, we're there for it.
They're helping us right along. Yeah.
And speaking of stretching, we're in our 50s, all of us. So right before we get started,
Everybody,
shake off the cobwebs from 2024.
Yep. Twist.
And dear listener, while we're doing this, please follow us on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us right now. Mm-hmm. Hey, before we start chatting formally here, a quick announcement. Yeah, hey, look, so...
Is
it still attached to John? Is that what happened?
John still hasn't found the source of the sound.
Did you hear that ding?
No, did not.
No.
Hey, later this week, keep an ear out for my interview with author Douglas Burton. So Douglas wrote this book, The Heroine's Labyrinth, Archetypal Designs in Heroine-Led Fiction.
Nice.
So are you guys familiar with the hero's journey, the concept of the hero's journey?
A bit from AP English, a little bit, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
In brief, it was this sort of story structure that was identified by Joseph Campbell as being in real stories, fictional stories going back millennia. Like they had all these common elements. It really entered the zeitgeist when Star Wars in 1977 came out, because George Lucas, in some behind-the-scenes footage, some behind-the-scenes interviews, documentaries, etc., was mentioning Joseph Campbell's hero's journey as the structure of his film. And then folks started paying attention to this. But what it is, it basically just sets out how stories over and over again follow a similar pattern, have similar characters. Well, this gentleman, Douglas Burton, when writing a book of his own that was actually based on a real-life empress from the Byzantine Empire, realized, this hero's journey doesn't fit her story. And much like Joseph Campbell, by reading dozens of books and movies, watching movies, he started noticing patterns in female-led stories that was different. And
how they differ. Okay.
Oh, yeah. And it's so cool because, if you want to toss this out as, whatever, that's a bunch of nonsense. Or some guy looking to make a buck, or some guy riffing on a thing that's for men only, right? It's crazy. The examples he gives, you're like, wow, yeah.
Is it like the WNBA? Like you have to have your own ladies basketball league because they can't be in the regular one? And that's like, which side of that do you fall on? Do you lump them all together, or do you recognize the differences between the sexes?
Right.
So, that's right.
And interesting, what Doug points out is, even though he's talking about heroes and heroines, that they're not gender exclusive. So you could have a male-led story that follows the heroine's labyrinth and vice versa, and often do. But, more often you have them follow these different journeys based on their gender. I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Anyway, it's really cool. Look, when I first learned about this book, I was interested, but it was only when I began reading, I was like, this is way cooler than I thought. And
Wow.
was really akin to Joseph Campbell's analysis, And I was like, wow, it's really kind of exciting and thrilling to see something contemporary that we're still making these kind of discoveries,
It's a whole new archetype. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was always there. You just, you found the pieces, you put it together like, oh, this forms a picture. It was always in front of me, but I didn't recognize it. Yeah, I see that.
And I can go on and on with you guys. But we got our own stories to talk about. So check out our conversation with Doug later this week, where we will go on and on about all these different archetypes and talk about how they're present in 1980s films that we love and know well. So much so that when you hear us use these as examples, it starts to click. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's right. I get it.
Nice.
All right. So, hey, that's that. All right, let's get started on, you notice we start talking about female-led stories and a bunch of people dropped off the live.
Uh-oh.
All right.
Come back.
Hey, you're missing out. Whatever.
Yeah.
They're just talking about the ladies today.
That's right. Yeah, talking about the ladies.
Let's talk more about the ladies.
Right, let's do that right now in 1980s news. All right, hey, cool. Oh, yeah, so this is super cool. So first up in 1980s news, and this is reported by Rick Parker. Yeah, that Rick Parker who we thank every week as an early adopter of our show, which means when we had a show for some time at that point, but when we launched our Patreon, Rick was the first, one of the first few people to say, sign me up. And so we're forever indebted to Rick for that. But not only does he support us in that way as a listener and a patron, but he just right before we went on the air, he sent me this message here, and I think it's so cool. What Rick did is he in his email, he included a list of 8 of the top 40 films from 2024 by box office, and notes that, quote, there are at least 8 movies in the top 40 that have 80s connections.
Nice. That's 20%, right?
Yeah. All right. Yeah, you did the math.
John approved my math. It wasn't just me.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and for me, I guess we've talked about these things as, in context of the movies individually, maybe a little bit broader, higher level. But I've never thought about in this context at the end of a year, we can look back and say, wow, the 80s had, this, what was it, 20% influence on films this past year.
Wow.
And none of them will surprise you, I don't think. But for example, number 5 was Dune Part 2, which is, again, another retelling of that story, which originates in a book. Beetlejuice at number 10, which we saw together.
Yes.
Right.
16 is Alien Romulus, which is in between the first and second Aliens films, which came out in the 70s and the 80s, respectively. The Garfield movie, of course, something we grew up with, the Garfield.
Wait. That made the list of the top 40?
Yeah, it's number
by
20.
box office.
Yeah, it's 21.
Okay. Not by good movie listings, but by box office.
Yes.
Okay. Just checking.
Yeah. After they have your money, you can't get it back.
Just the dollar signs.
That would be interesting, though, wouldn't it? If you genuinely look, I'm not satisfied with this film, you can get your money back?
Or what if you get a rating? You're like 80%. I need 20% back.
Okay, yeah.
I'm expecting an awesome movie. So if I go in, it's like a half good movie, half my money back. I mean, you did give me a movie.
Right.
So,
Yes.
movie tickets $20. And I'm like, this was terrible. Give me back $18.50.
It's a whole industry revolved in just the negotiating of the return.
Yeah, this was at least worth like $4. I'll give you 16 back. You have this haggling thing before you can leave.
Yeah, I think you're right too. There's got to be a floor to it. Yeah, you can't. Yeah, they get to keep $4 at least.
Yes,
just for processing fees.
It's an after haggle for quality,
shipping and handling.
It's hard to believe, but Ghostbusters: Frozen Empire came out this past year.
Yep.
The Fall Guy, of course, which I love that movie. I've seen that 5 or 6 times.
Loved it too.
Furiosa: A Mad Max Saga, which was a prequel to our beloved Mad Max. Not the original film. It sticks there among the. No, I guess it is because. Well, no, we don't really know when it is relative to the Mad Max films that we got in the 1980s. But it's part of that saga, of course.
Right, we know where it is relative to Furiosa.
Right.
And it's around the first one, but that's irrelevant. Anyway.
Yeah.
Because we saw Max. Yeah.
Right. And Transformers 1, obviously, is a franchise that began in the 1980s. Rick also reminds us that this doesn't include the streamers, which had films like Axel F and Roadhouse.
Yeah.
Roadhouse.
Which, the way these companies report or don't report their subscription followers, viewership, earnings, etc. We can't really align them neatly with these other films. But we're
Right.
Both of those were very successful for their respective streamers. Rick closes out his message with, quote, "When I look at this list, I appreciate the 80s are still going strong, but also it is really sad as I see almost nothing that is original material, so many sequels or reboots. I weep for my children's formative years."
Well,
end quote.
That's a two-parter. I mean, there's 80% new stuff because only 20% of it, by Cat's math, was actually related to the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a further 80% that isn't related to the 80s. But then again, if these Gen Alpha people, if their formative years are seeing riffs off of 80s stuff, that could be worse. That's all right.
Right.
You know,
That's
at
not
least
too
they're getting
bad.
quality. You know, they're getting good franchises.
And I know Rick Parker's a great dad. He's showing them the original.
He's just, the future generally, children of the world.
Yeah, you can't show all of them.
Yeah, no.
80s movies. or get on it, Rick. Come on, figure out a way to make sure that all the children know.
It's important that your kids see Caligula. It's really imperative.
I don't know that Rick is as prolific in that way as Caligula, that he'd have that many children, Kat. I'm not.
No, I meant you. You said children of the world.
Yeah, I know. And then you said, Rick, get on it. I mean, you didn't.
Get on the love train. The love train.
Marcus points out that the top 10 were all sequels. Wow. That's probably what Rick's talking about, right? That's a bummer.
Which is exactly why they make sequels. Because the top 10 are sequels. Guess what they're going to make next year?
Yeah.
More sequels.
Yeah.
It's because that's where the money is. Yeah, it's so difficult to get an original franchise. Stop trying to make franchises is the point. Just try to make good movies. But barring getting a good movie out there, a franchise is, often is a tent pole for a publisher, and it keeps them afloat because we know these are going to make money, and then we can afford to do other stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, it does seem, though, that the affording to do other stuff has sort of fallen more by the wayside, right? You don't see these big studios necessarily having smaller, divisions that take more chances.
That stuff's on Apple TV. That stuff's on Hulu. Yeah, those interesting, weird one-off things, those are the adventurous houses that do that now, it seems.
Marcus is bitching about sequels while watching them is kind of dumb.
I wasn't currently watching them.
Yeah, and we wouldn't have a podcast if we went by these kinds of rules, Marcus.
That's right.
It's exactly what I do. Bitch about things I like.
We can't be held back by rules.
Oh, and hey, we should take a moment to say hi to everybody because Marcus, I can see Marcus's comments because he's joined us on the live stream here on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and other platforms. I see Darth Baca is on there and Doug is on there. And anybody else who's out there may just be lurking, and that's cool. Hey, in other 1980s news, as reported by the BBC, we've got a sad story here. 2 men were found dead while searching for Bigfoot. So, of course, immediately I thought about John, but not because of his love of Bigfoot, I should be clear.
Because he hopes I die in the woods.
Yeah, no, not wishing ill upon him or anyone for that matter. I feel bad for these guys, but I don't know. It should have been anticipated, I suppose. Well, according to authorities in Washington State, 2 men from Portland, Oregon were found dead after a 3-day search was launched on Christmas Day after a family member reported that the pair had not returned from a trip to the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest to search for proof of the mythical hairy forest-dwelling bipedal primates. Now, first of all, look, I know how we are, so it's not like I want to just goof on these guys. I don't.
Right.
But you got to imagine... Look, it's sad that this family member had to be like, well, where are these 2 guys whose identities we don't know yet?
Right. Yeah.
But the last words were to them, because we know this were, hey, we're going to go out and look for Bigfoot. We'll be back. And I don't know what my reaction, I think if I were these folks, I don't know. I'd be like, you know what? Maybe not now. Maybe not ever. Maybe stay for Christmas. Christmas is obviously right around the corner. Maybe bring a coat. I mean, these guys, it turns out, were ill prepared for what they were about to face.
Yes, and wasn't there a weather warning? There was a severe weather warning.
Well, and you got to wonder, maybe that was, like you look at the almanac and find out when it's good to go fishing. It might be that they're like, oh, well, maybe when it's stormy or overcast, maybe that's good Sasquatching weather or something. Maybe they chose to go because of the severe. I don't know. I'm not saying that I've done all the Sasquatch research on how to find them, but I've done some. But it could be that they actually chose to go then, but were ill prepared for the severe conditions.
Yeah, the weather was bad. It turns out conditions in the Cascade Mountains had been frigid in the days before and during the search, which included snow, freezing rain, and temperatures falling below freezing. I think the one tragic thing about this is it puts a number of other folks in danger as they go looking for these two folks who hunt.
Yeah.
And over 60 volunteers searched with aircraft and dogs in heavily wooded terrain and brutally cold weather conditions. And according to the Skamania County Sheriff's Office, quote, the deaths appear to be due to exposure based on weather conditions and ill preparedness, end quote. Yeah. Not surprised.
Yeah. Exposure to Bigfoot or the weather? Is it?
They didn't have Bigfoot fighting armor on. Like that bear guy. Remember that bear man? What was that? You need that bear suit so he could fight bears?
Well, like you, I don't want to make light of these gentlemen that lost their lives, obviously, out in the wilderness. But I do think it was disrespectful. They didn't assume maybe they ran into Bigfoot. Like nobody, look, they're out there doing that thing. Why wouldn't your first assumption be these guys were successful in their endeavors and maybe that's why they're not back? That's not what they assume. They're in the storm. They probably succumbed to. I think it's disrespectful that these Bigfoot hunters, they didn't have to prove they weren't killed by Bigfoot, that it was something else. They assumed it was that.
But then they found out that it wasn't Bigfoot, probably.
Yeah. I mean, they proved it later, but.
Right.
Maybe.
Or,
to John's point, did Bigfoot make it look like they died of exposure?
Oh, he has ice breath. That's what you didn't know.
That's what I'm picturing. Yes.
Like Superman.
And then he lays the bodies out in a way that they were huddling for warmth or something.
Right.
Maybe they had coats on. They took the coats off of them. Marcus says out of reverence for their nonsense, they should have been left out as Bigfoot feet.
Well, we don't know that's what he eats.
That's true. Yeah, there's no indication.
Here's a twist. Turns out they were abducted.
Yeah.
and redeposited, of course.
Yes.
So it turns out that there's hundreds of sightings of Sasquatch reported in the Pacific Northwest.
Good. Here comes my favorite part of this story. Keep going, Will.
Well, it might not be. Well, we're going to take a little. We're going to diverge from the main story for a moment.
All right, I'll hang in there.
Yes.
In the Pacific, so yeah, there's hundreds of sightings there in that Pacific Northwest, which is the northwest of the United States and the western area of Canada. And it seems like, based on doing a little digging, that maybe John knows this already, that the origins of this particular cryptid began in British Columbia.
Yeah.
There have been 37 notable Sasquatch sightings near the town of Harrison Hot Springs, which is in BC, since 1900. Regular sightings have kept a popular legend alive, but now it's being told from an indigenous perspective. The change is driven by the public interest in the idea of a Sasquatch rooted in spirituality and symbolism rather than sensationalism.
See there?
It turns out the creature is considered sacred to the West Coast First Nations, particularly Stahelis, who have lived in the Harrison River Valley for at least 10,000 years. In fact, the name itself, Sasquatch, is the anglicized version of Saskets, which means hairy man in the Stahelis dialect. And according to Kelsey Charlie, a Stahelis band counselor, he says, quote, the word comes from a mountain that's called Saskattel, the place where the Sasquatch gather.
Right, which means hairy mountain. We got it.
Yeah.
John, are you booking your trip? Are you going to the hairy mountain?
I've spent some time in the Pacific Northwest, not Bigfoot hunting, but I loved it when I would go there for business. The further northwest, if you went to Oregon or you went to Washington State or whatever, the density of awareness of Bigfoot as a cryptid, like it goes from being something you hear about to something that's in the convenience stores, right? It's very frontmost in their mind. It's not like, oh yeah, remember there was a legend of Bigfoot. Like it's out there because, as you said, it kind of originated from there. You know, down here in the Southeast, we have the skunk ape, which is really kind of an Evergladesy kind of Florida thing, which is a variant of, yes. Well, Yeti is effectively like a winter region Bigfoot.
Right.
And in the very humid, arid, hot areas, we have the skunk ape, which is another variant or subspecies or something of Bigfoot.
And there is some sort of unifying theory or thought that these are folks, these are creatures that are part of the same species of great apes that have been, forgotten by history or remain so, secluded, living among us in our various lands. So yeah, they have different names in different areas and maybe very different. No, it sounds like I'm buying into this bullshit.
What? No, it's all making sense. See how much logic it makes when you talk about it.
All right. Anyway, on to the part John wanted to talk about. In Washington State, turns out there have been so many sightings of Sasquatch that some communities have taken measures to protect the hairy mythological creature.
You don't establish laws to protect mythological things. They're pretty safe because they don't exist.
Wow.
I got to look up this law.
This is belief.
Keep going. You'll finish the law. Go ahead. Keep going.
All right.
It's my
Yeah.
favorite
So
part.
in Skamania County, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, where the place where the pair went missing, a person could get a year in jail or $1,000 fine.
$1,000 fine for fucking with Bigfoot.
If you mess with one of them.
Thank you. Vindication.
You get penalized if the folklore creature is, quote, harmed.
Don't do it.
I would like to have been on city council. You know, there's got to be a guy like me there that's like, hang on, if we're doing this, let's add unicorns and a Loch Ness monster and let's just put them all in there.
Hey, we're not putting riders on my Sasquatch bill. You open your own bill.
That's pork. You're adding pork to my bill.
How about the Jersey Devil?
Yeah, why not?
There's no Jersey Devils in the Pacific Northwest. What's wrong with you, Cat?
Then you have no problem adding it. Your Honor. Now, look, I just got this story. Marcus just sent this to me. It's a riff off of this thing. It turns out that while these folks were searching, thieves stole gear while the rescue team recovered the two men.
Rescuers gear? Or
Yeah, thieves cut through a
original guys'
10-foot
gear?
barbed wire fence and stole gear from trailers.
Wow.
The rescue team said the search and rescue team at the county's office is facing a significant setback. Thieves stole equipment while crews were out recovering the bodies of the two Portland men.
Again, they leap right to thieves. It could be Sasquatch
Yeah.
tearing through the fence
You're right.
and stealing stuff. You know?
Does Sasquatch get fined for messing with their stuff?
No.
For stealing?
Sasquatch is above the law.
Yeah,
Protected
Sasquatch.
wildlife.
Sasquatch is not bound by the laws of mankind. Cat.
Yeah. Come on, Cat.
He's bipedal.
Hairy man makes his own laws.
Oh, man. That'd be something if Sasquatch was stealing the gear to try to slow them down after making it look like they died from exposure. Oh.
See how smart they are? There you go.
Yeah.
That's why I got to protect them.
If they've remained hidden for 10,000 years, well, I guess not entirely because, like we mentioned, there's these native people that, you know, have been aware of them for that long. If they, I'm talking like they really exist. This is a bunch of bullshit.
I wonder if they call on each other to help create distractions. You know, like Skunk Ape, I need you to create a disturbance so I can steal some gear.
Skunk Ape, I need you to do some skunking. Skunk powers activate.
Y'all smell that?
Yeah.
It's coming from this direction. Let's head over here. Thanks, Skunky. Pragmatically, it's quite possible that they allowed these laws to take place because
Well,
I'm listening.
Because people like to goof on Bigfoot and they put on costumes and pretend blah, blah, blah. And they might get shot, right? If they're out there perpetrating, you know, like they are Bigfoot. And so you got to protect Bigfoot. And by association, that protects knuckleheads who dress up like Bigfoot so they're not shot by hunters. So,
Okay. All right.
it protects the real Bigfoot and the fake ones equally.
yeah, I guess. I don't know. I'd have to look at it specifically. It does really seem like, at least based on this little bit we got, you'd have to be a real Bigfoot to be able to, you know, claim damages, I guess.
Maybe you just have to be bipedal and a little hairy.
Maybe.
I'd be me. I'd pass it.
It's probably a good time to point out again, hey, this is a 1980s Now podcast where we talk about
Yes,
how
right.
the 1980s
Well,
is
look.
still relevant today.
Do you need me to point out? I mean, we had such a fascination with Sasquatch and Bigfoot in the 1980s. He was even a character of the Bionic Man, for crying out loud.
I'm
Right.
not complaining a bit. Just
So many in search
Make it
of
clear.
and various shows like that, showing terrible footage.
Unsolved mystery,
Leonard
There
Nimoy.
you go.
time life. And
Well, Marcus says there's a
the
similar law in Florida. You get fined $3.50 for messing with Skunk Ape. Wasn't that a Hanna-Barbera cartoon? Skunk Ape, Skunk Ape. Switching gears here and thinking about another fictional character that is like a skunk. Stinkor from the He-Man universe, because per deadline,
Stinkor.
Jared, you remember Stinkor from He-Man?
Yeah. You don't get Stinkor? Oh,
You could have convinced me of that because I was not an avid watcher of He-Man. You totally could have had me
He's
there.
an action figure that actually stunk.
Now I don't know if you guys are teasing me or not.
He was an anthropomorphic skunk from the He-Man, Masters of the Universe line of characters that the Mattel mixed in patchouli oil or something into the mold so that it stunk, because that was his, one of his abilities.
The actual character, the figure, the toy,
Yeah.
Smelly.
I'm Googling right now.
That's true.
He doesn't believe us at all.
This is what I've created. This, just
Oh, wow. There it is.
controversial.
Okay. Got it.
Just, we trust but verify. That's all.
Not controversial. Yeah, not controversial. What would be the word? I don't know. Where you just doubt me. All right, anyway, so per Deadline, Jared Leto has been confirmed as Skeletor in an upcoming He-Man.
Not Stinkor.
Now, I
Skeletor.
literally Googled, because this is my feeling. This is just anecdotal. This is just my feeling. But I literally Googled this phrase.
All right.
Is Jared Leto box office poison?
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Because my recollection is there's very few films I like him in. I like him in the Blade Runner sequel, 2049.
Blade Runner. That's the one I was thinking. Yep.
That's it. End of list. He has a really small part, I think, in Fight Club, maybe. But it's so.
I don't remember
really
the part. I saw that movie, but I don't
really.
remember.
I don't think he has any lines. Maybe.
Well, and there was such anticipation over his character actor preparation to play the Joker, which ended up being a flop. The film maybe so, but his portrayal kind of a flop too.
Look, the brand itself is so strong, right? I mean, certainly among folks of our generation, and not all the recent incarnations of He-Man have been as successful as others. We've had a few different animated versions on Netflix most recently. So there's a chance it could be good, but I don't know. I just have little faith in projects attached to him, and I don't know why. It may just be I don't like the guy. I don't know. Morbius is another example. That movie was garbage.
Yeah,
but
that was not great. Also,
I don't know. He keeps getting chances.
Well, for Skeletor, at least he's going to be covered in some kind of prosthesis that, maybe he will be recognizable enough. Maybe he'll escape the curse because the curse is hovering around him, and we lost track of him because he looks like Skeletor.
You can't find him. The curse.
That's right. The curse, like, where the hell did I put Jared Leto? He was just here.
Well, I'll go bother Stinkor.
I'm reminded that I can find him just to sniff around.
That's right. Played by Skunk Ape.
He played, I guess you could say Jared Leto played a character in the Haunted Mansion movie, which I really liked. The most recent one. He plays the
Hatbox Ghost?
Yes.
Yes.
Supposedly, although it doesn't sound like his voice, and it's a completely CGI character.
Oh, wow.
That character has somewhat of a skeletal face even, too. So maybe they thought that.
He was playing the ghost of Jared Leto's career.
Yeah, maybe. Brandon says Jared Leto is a talented actor who has played some really bad roles. He was great in Dallas Buyers Club. Yes, that was a movie I was thinking of, too. He's good.
That's when I first was aware of him as an actor. And that such a good performance in that. It could be that has given him all these opportunities that it could be right. He could just be going into horrible roles. But I mean, when I think, I don't follow his career closely, but he has been like, the Joker's the one I think of the most. He's like over prepared and over crazified and it made it almost like mythological. And it was just the Joker. It was nothing special.
Which Joker was that? The most recent one? I haven't.
The Suicide Squad one?
Suicide Squad one.
The first Suicide Squad, I think. Yeah.
Which is probably like 3 Jokers ago, I think, at this point.
Yeah.
And honestly, that may have tainted my perception of him. Was a lot of the off-screen antics, supposedly, when he was playing that role, remaining in character and sending people boxes with rats in them. And
that kind of stuff poisoned me on him personally.
Well, in addition to Skeletor, they've also cast the role of 3 other villains. So Leto will be playing Skeletor, as I mentioned. They've additionally cast Sam Wilson as Trapjaw. You can picture that character, I bet. Some actor named I'm guessing this is the Swedish, some sort of Norse name.
He's somewhere in Scandinavia.
Hathor Björnsson.
I looked him up. He was in Game of Thrones. He played the Mountain in Game of Thrones.
Oh, he's the Mountain? Oh, okay.
He's the
I never watched the show, but I'm familiar with that character.
Yeah.
He's just a giant man. I thought.
Yeah.
I thought what's his name was the Mountain? Aquaman. Jason Momoa. No, that's not right.
No. He was. He was the.
He was just a foothill.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, the Mountain guy is playing Goat Man, which I don't know, and Koho Ata is playing Triclops.
Who's playing Skunkor?
There's no Skunkor announced yet.
Stinkor.
There's no Skunkor.
Skunkor.
I just conflated.
I feel like I don't even need to remind you about what the show is because you all know that. But of course, look, you can't think about talking about Skeletor conjures images of Frank Langella as that character from 1987's. I think really bad adaptation of the story. We've talked about that before. But he wasn't a bad thing necessarily about that. He was they did what they did as far as prosthetics back then, and he went for it. And it turns out Langella, who was, an acclaimed actor, and so many other films I'd seen and loved him in before that, and since, it's one of his favorite roles of all time that he has played.
Really?
Yeah. And when asked whether he minds that folks think about him mostly as that role when he meets fans, he said, quote, a lot of people talk to me about Skeletor, which is one of my favorite parts. They always say, did you feel you were slumming? And I say, absolutely not. Huh. My son was 4 years old and I wanted to see his father as Skeletor, and I loved playing it. It's one of my favorite parts still.
Wow. Very cool.
It's great.
We can see how Jared Leto, sizes up in 2026 when the movie comes out in June. Yeah, and actually to close out my question to Google, is Jared Leto box office poison? Google AI wrote no. Jared Leto is not box office poison, and explained, the films he's been in that have been successful. Brandon agrees. The Skeletor was the only redeeming thing about 80s He-Man. Yeah, I agree. And it ended with, they implied there was going to be a sequel, with Skeletor kind of surviving, but nope.
Oh.
Surprise.
I'm glad on that. Hey, I know it sounds like we've got some giant corporate sponsor behind us, but we don't. Instead, our show is brought to you every week by listeners just like you. And by brought to you by them, I mean they help pay for the bills. And there's a bunch of them to bring you a quality podcast about 80s nostalgia and its continued impact today. Hey, to join this group of fantastic folks, please go to patreon.com/1980s now. And if you can't do that, follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and the podcast platform you're listening to right now. In other 1980s news per Game Rant, Secret Level's horrifying Pac-Man is getting its own game. There's actually a twist in this that's kind of interesting.
It answers my question. I was going to say, so have you seen it yet, Kat? But since she shivered, she's seen it.
Oh, gosh.
And I had my husband watch it, but I did not tell him what he was watching because you guys suggested that.
Yeah. How'd it go?
About it. He got it eventually. It took a while, but he kept asking, what is that? What? I said, just watch. Just watch. And but I told him, I cued him somehow. Like, what does this remind you of? Or what can you connect this to? And I forget exactly which point, but towards the end, he was like, Pac-Man? So he got it. I don't think I would have necessarily.
Well, yeah, certainly not till the end when the little orb looks like a Pac-Man. Yeah, and then the giant fleshy thing it creates is a giant Pac-Man.
Even then, I don't know if my brain would have allowed me to put those two together.
Right, because an orb is a thing. I know a lot of people compared it to Phantasm that had these orbs with knives in them. And there have been dangerous orbs before that weren't Pac-Man. So I can see how you might miss the connection entirely if you didn't know.
Titled Shadow Labyrinth, the newly revealed game is being positioned as part of Pac-Man's 45th anniversary celebrations. We talked about how much Kat hadn't seen it at the time, but how much John and I had loved this horrifying, haunting episode, and its connections, it's connections to the video game. So it's really cool to find out that there's an actual video game that's like this episode that we'll be able to play soon.
Will it be here? I have a couple of questions. I don't know if maybe you guys can answer this. I'm wondering, will it be as gory or horrifying as the clip? Will the game be what the clip was? And I have another question, but I'll ask that in a minute. It's about the title of the game.
Oh,
the name of the game.
Well, I don't know how gory it's going to get, but certainly the art style is almost identical, but not as zoomed in. So you are the character wearing the trench coat or the tarp or whatever, and the orb is flying around you, kind of leading you around the world, or you're controlling them both or whatever. So in as much as the art style is the same, I suppose if we zoom in on something and see you kill something, it might be. They had not showed any explicit goriness yet, but it's kind of implied based on Circle.
So for folks who don't know, we're talking about Secret Levels. It's an Amazon Prime series that takes its inspiration from various games that we liked, actually even contemporary games, but some of them are from nostalgia, including Dungeons and Dragons. But the one that caught our attention the most is this one that was an adaptation of Pac-Man, which is haunting and horrifying, just as we mentioned. It's visceral, it's gory, it's somewhat, I would say, akin to some body horror that we see in live action, some of the imagery and some of the things that
and
happen.
very divisive too.
Is that right?
There are people pretty much love it or hate it. Pretty much is what I've seen. Yeah, I did a analysis of it on YouTube, and
You did. Yep.
people are like, I loved it, it's my favorite, and this is the worst thing ever. They're running Pac-Man. There's almost no middle. It's almost no middle.
Like,
I could see that.
this is so ridiculous to me. Like, love it or don't like it, but hate it. I mean, how do you get to the point of that's not my Pac-Man?
Yeah, that's exactly.
But like we were talking about just a moment ago, they're so different that you could conceivably watch the short film and never know it's Pac-Man.
Yes.
Yeah.
So how could that interfere with your enjoyment of the video game from 45 years ago?
The fact that it exists makes people angry. That's the world we live in. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, they took a lot of bold swings with their short film, and Bandai Namco likewise took some really, some leaps of imagination to create this video game, Shadow Labyrinth, which is clearly tied to the secret level episode. But it turns out it's not an adaptation. It's the other way around, as the development of the game started long before the show, which I feel like that's been kind of hidden from us, right? We talked about this.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
The story they're making us sound like these secret level folks, creators Tim Miller and his team, were challenged to create what Namco said was something that would make people think, what did you do to Pac-Man?
Right.
And it took them a while to come up with the right thing. But if they were given this video game as a thing,
I think it was a little bit of subterfuge, but a little bit of creativity. It's probably a half truth in that they're like, you want to do something radical? We're doing this crazy thing in a game next year. Let's give you the elevator pitch, show you some artwork, and see what crazy thing you can do with it. So I expect the truth is somewhere in the middle.
That's what I imagined happened. And also that's part of what fueled my question about, I wonder if the game is going to be as gory, body horror, all of that. Because maybe not. Maybe in this short, they wanted to really ramp things up or take things in that direction.
Yeah, the footage we've seen, like John mentioned, they haven't provided anything that looks violent, but it does look like you're working side by side with this orb that's helping you. So I guess we don't know if they have this, if they have the same goals necessarily. You know, in the movie, we learn that the orb is manipulative.
So let me ask you this. So I had this high school English teacher analysis that I did that I kind of like, what does this mean? What does this represent? And then after I published that, I had people come back in the comments, awesome, with other interpretations. I'm like, I didn't think of it that way. So if you've seen the short, essentially this humanoid is consumed by the orb in order to gain the ability to fight the ghost. So I equated that, what is the thing in the world of Pac-Man that Pac-Man consumes to give it the ability? It's a power pellet. Right. It's a consumable. It's a thing that is grown and harvested to give Pac-Man special abilities. And I thought I was a genius. Like, that's super analytical and smart of me. And then someone said, you might be right, John, but maybe the humanoid character represents the real player in the real world who puts a quarter in the machine. I'm like, I hadn't thought of, he's outside the world and in act. So that's, it's open. The fact that it's open to that kind of interpretation and ways to look at it and things it can means it's good whether you like it or not, in my opinion. If you think it's horrible, it made you think, unless you just chose not to think about it and you're just being intransigent about it. But I think it's good in that it makes you think and it presents it in a weird way. And even when I thought I had all figured out, somebody came in, out of the corner and went, no, what was this? Which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it makes me think of like, not this is not what's happening, obviously, but like Last Starfighter, like the Pac-Man video game being a sort of test of finding somebody who could help the Pac-Man get out of this. Speaking of being intransigent, Marcus says it was the worst thing ever. But,
there we go.
But didn't ruin Pac-Man. All right.
But didn't ruin Pac-Man. That's good.
He's not thinking straight these days. I forgive him.
We're at that point, I guess, right?
We are. Yes.
Okay, that's good.
We've arrived.
I remember a few weeks ago, you're like, wait, you gotta wait. Hold on. I was like, I got some stuff lined up. Okay.
Got him in the chamber.
Yeah. I look forward to playing it. It looks pretty cool. I hope there's a little more maybe connective tissue between this and Pac-Man. Otherwise, why is it Pac-Man?
Okay, here's my question about the name. So it's called Shadow Labyrinth. And when I read that, I'm like, well, that doesn't say anything about Pac-Man to me, really. Like Labyrinth, okay, Pac-Man's in a maze, that's fine. But then I remembered that the ghosts or monsters have, there's two sets of names for them. So it's Blinky, Inky, Pinky, and Clyde, but they have nicknames, or is it the other way around, of Shadow. And then there's, Bashful and Speedy and Pokey. So
There you go.
is this a reference to one of the ghosts?
I like that, Kat. I think it's very insightful and very, quite possibly, yes. You could say this is effectively, this is Blinky's Labyrinth.
Right. Which makes me wonder if there's, the other ghosts are going to have different.
Or of course it could be interpreted as this is a darker version of that maze. There's the shadow, which is a little more pedestrian in terms of the usage of the word shadow. It could have an implication the other way, certainly.
I have it around here somewhere. But when I was a kid, I loved Pac-Man so much.
Yeah.
I started drawing my own Pac-Man comic book. I had these visions of, Kat's reaching for her comic.
I have it. How
the hell do you have it there now?
It's in reach.
Kat,
and it's
mine is in a box buried in the...
It's right here. I did too. Yes.
She is like Mary Poppins. I don't...
I'm gonna.
Do you have a bag of holding there next to you? You just reach in like all of my treasure is in this one sack.
So one of my comics, because I imagined, this was going to be a series, and I was 10 years old.
Oh, I love that.
One of my comics was exploring what is inside the ghost's house, and Pac-Man actually goes in there, and it turns out to be like a haunted house, spider webs and monsters and stuff, and so he gets the hell out of there. But you made me think that when you were suggesting maybe Shadow is a reference to the shadow, the ghost that is like a shadow to you. Because I think those imply the sort of abilities or characteristics of the different ghosts.
That's right.
Yeah.
One's right on your ass, one's faster. That kind of.
Yes.
He shadows you. He stays on your tail. He's always trying to get to where you are, so he shadows you. Right.
So maybe the Labyrinth could be something like that. The game will feature around 30 unique bosses, each requiring specific abilities to defeat. While most of its gameplay deviates from the classic Pac-Man formula, sections where the protagonist transforms into a puck will mimic the series' signature mechanics.
The puck.
I don't know what that. Maybe there's that merging like in the video in the movie.
Right.
Maybe right
monsters
without killing, or maybe it's with killing and he picks up another one. I don't know. But there are little snippets in the trailer that you can see a small Pac-Man like working his way around a wall, appears to be eating something.
Oh.
So, so there's that Pac-Man mechanic, but maybe, who knows?
Maybe
I think
it's a game within the game.
All bets are off. It could be anything, this game.
We don't have a concrete release date, but it's tentatively aiming to hit the market in 2025, intended to be part of the celebrations dedicated to the 45th anniversary, which falls on May 21st.
Or 22nd.
Wait, what?
What's that?
What did you say, John?
I was being pedantic. It's fine.
Oh, okay.
I said or 22nd, depending on who you ask.
Oh, got it. Yes.
Is that right?
It was calendar related. So, yes.
Yeah. And it kind of doesn't matter because it hit different parts of the world at different times. So the date is not that important. It's 1980. That's all that matters.
In other 1980s news, per Screen Rant, an 80s trend has aged remarkably well 4 decades later. Ooh. So while only a few theatrical franchises receive animated TV spin-offs, think about Back to the Future, Beetlejuice, Ghostbusters, this 80s phenomenon precipitated a major change in contemporary Hollywood, at least according to Screen Rant. Like I said, maybe this is the one where I was like, maybe a little bit of a reach. I think we would have evolved this way, or maybe there were some analogs or things that predate this kind of idea, right?
Okay.
Anyway, although the first blockbuster is often credited as 1975's Jaws, it wasn't until the 1980s that movie franchises truly flourished. Films including Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Back to the Future, and slew of horror films saw multiple sequels released during that decade. The 1980s, however, also birthed another phenomenon popularized during our favorite era, the animated TV spinoff. And while some of these children's shows were questionable, including Rambo's The Force of Freedom or the Toxic Avengers' Toxic Crusaders.
Wow.
RoboCop.
Which were softened for younger
operation.
They were very different than their film counterparts. They were for younger audiences.
Yes, very much. Yeah.
But many of these spin-offs allowed the popular franchises a comparatively inexpensive way to expand their fictional universes. Shows like the Real Ghostbusters, Beetlejuice, Back to the Future, which we mentioned, Teen Wolf, Karate Kid, Police Academy. Remember Police Academy had a cartoon?
Yeah.
I don't remember some of these. Some of them I saw because I was in the same room while they were playing. I don't remember a Back to the Future spinoff. I don't remember, what did you just say? Police Academy?
Police Academy, Karate Kid.
Karate Kid. So there was a Karate Kid cartoon spinoff. I don't
Bill and
remember
Ted's
that.
Excellent Adventure had a cartoon series.
Right.
I wasn't tuned in. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Well, and what else it kind of did is, yes, it expanded the universe, but it also served to keep the franchise in the front of mind of a public that they do not have a film to go see. So, that's a movie from 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 8 years ago. No. The cartoon is right now, right? It's still alive and reminding you to buy the toys and it's coming. So when a movie comes out, it's a better success now because the Ghostbusters cartoon kept you aware of the Ghostbusters until the next one came out, I think.
Right. Yeah. A Screen Rant described it. Talk about allowing these spin-offs to allow you to sort of keep up with your favorite characters on shorter weekly adventures while they're not on the big screen.
Even if they weren't necessarily canonical, like maybe these things didn't exist. And maybe that's not really the Doc and Marty that we see in the next episode of Back to the Future.
Right.
But it kept me in love with the characters doing things that didn't count until the next movie where they did, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and in some, they may be more beloved than the original films. I'm thinking about Beetlejuice in particular, which created a much more empathetic, I guess, friendly demon than we saw on screen that actually is close, is best friends, essentially, with the character.
Beetlejuice and Lydia were it was a cop movie, a buddy cop movie, the whole thing, right? They were best of pals running around, whereas then we see Beetlejuice, and the last thing she wants is to see him again.
Right.
Yeah.
But in the cartoon, they were pals.
Yeah. In fact, I'm reminded that some folks, before the sequel came out, were suggesting, like, younger audiences that grew up on the cartoon, what are they going to make of this?
Oh, interesting.
That they're not going on adventures together, which could have been the way direction they took it,
Well, they had a falling out during their last adventure in the cartoon. So. I never want to see you again.
They retcon it, Well, Screen Rant suggests that streaming spin-offs of contemporary cinematic universes function a lot like the animated TV shows did for 80s franchises. So we've got smaller scale, Marvel shows, Star Wars shows, for example, that are less expensive, at least in theory. We just learned that season 1 of Andor cost $2 billion or something.
Wow.
Literally. It's literally, I'd have to Google it, but it was like $1 billion, at least one, maybe two, to produce. Which never makes
You'd think they could have afforded subtitles in that budget.
Oh, right.
I did enjoy Andor, but wow.
But not that much, $2 billion worth. But for the most part, they are generally cheaper to produce than these, multi-$100 million films.
Right.
That's like 4 red ones is what that is. Holy Moses.
But to John's point, they're able to extend and keep this brand alive and keep these characters alive on a smaller screen while they're not in theaters, and maybe holding that space, for them in the future.
Yep. Keeping them in the forefront there. Yeah.
The other thing that you can do now, in the 80s, the way you did it was make a cartoon. I'll take the Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure cartoon, for example, which is ridiculous and delightful. And it has none of the original actors in it. I want to say maybe George Carlin was almost in it. I can't remember, but certainly it's not Keanu Reeves.
Right.
And it's not, what's his name?
Alex Winter.
I'm drawing a blank. Thank you, Alex Winter. But
he was a guest on the show.
Point on the draw. But now what you can do, back then, film and television, those were 2 different pillars of the entertainment industry. Movie stars weren't on TV.
Right.
And TV people aspired to get in the movies.
Yes.
You didn't do both.
Right.
But now in this golden age of television that kind of started, I guess, probably 2005-ish or so, when like these prestige television shows came along. Now it's not, the line is blurred, if not gone. So you can have movie stars show up in TV shows, and some of them are continuations of these franchises, and they'll actually be in them, whereas you couldn't even do that before. And that's a change in the proliferation of media and how we consume it, probably. But it's made this ability to continue movies and television richer and more
Yes.
more canonical and more in line with what you're used to in the movies. So it's even better. Like, look at the WandaVision, the Marvel stuff. Those people in the movies are in all these shows. Normally they wouldn't have been in the 80s ever. You know, you'd never see a Chris Evans on TV unless he was doing a commercial for his movie. That was it.
Good point. So yeah, it's a hybrid now.
For sure.
And to your point, John, I know we've discussed before that some of the Star Wars series on Disney have maybe appreciated even the prequels more. So there is this, because they added these additional richness or layers to these stories that, you know, I had otherwise dismissed.
Obi-Wan, for sure.
Yeah. I don't know that I would tie this nest. Look, you know me, I'm a huge fan of the 1980s and what it's birthed. But I feel like maybe this article is correct. I guess I'd be hard pressed to find, and probably it's just because of the availability of channels. And I mean it in a broader sense but really in a physical sense too, channels on television that would have allowed for us to have models like this paradigm in previous decades. There wasn't streaming. There wasn't cable in the 70s, really. I mean, there are a lot of opportunities and places.
The first example of this that I can think of that kind of broke through that barrier that I can remember is like Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which was a live action television series that wasn't the people you knew necessarily. There wasn't all the same superheroes, but in the same universe and continued along, you know? Especially in the heyday of Marvel. I think Marvel's kind of struggling right now in my mind with the fatigue for superheroes, but certainly in that early heyday of those Marvel Cinematic Universe films, you were dying to see the next one.
Yeah.
And to have this series that at least was some of the people you knew, and they were talking about the people in the movies, even if you didn't see them, it kept that thread running.
Captain America was just here. You just missed him. Did you hear a door closing sound in the background?
Tahiti, it's a magical place.
It's magical.
Yes, oh yes. Yeah, look, I dig it. If it came from the 80s, fantastic. I think it is a useful, thing for all the reasons we mentioned. All right. Hey, final story in 1980s news. Per Joe Blow, rumors are circulating that Nosferatu director Robert Eggers is being lined up to direct a reboot of the fantasy classic Labyrinth. The 1986 cult film, directed by Muppets creator Jim Henson, produced by George Lucas, written by Monty Python star Terry Jones, and starring David Bowie, seemed destined for how could this fail?
Right.
I think ultimately it had more cult success than it did box office. But it also never had a sequel or remake, but that speculation has been rife for years. In fact, back far as 2016, reports have been making the rounds that a second installment was in the works. In 2017, it was announced that Don't Breathe's director Fede Alvarez had signed on to helm a spinoff of the film. I believe we talked about that when we talked about our long list of 1980s related films and checked on the status of them a year or so ago.
I think we did.
In fact, Jennifer Connelly, who starred in the original, was reported to be in conversations to return in the role as Sarah, the girl who searches through the labyrinth to find her baby brother Toby. But now it appears that we've taken a different path with Eggers, who's known for The Witch and The Lighthouse, which are good films. I like those movies.
Well, The Witch is good.
Yeah, that's true. The Witch is fantastic. Yeah. Lighthouse is a little...
The Lighthouse.
It's kind of weird. Yeah. But that via Jeff Snyder of the In Snyder, that Eggers is signed on for this project with Sony Pictures, which he would also co-write with Icelandic screenwriter and frequent Bjork collaborator. I'm cutting this all out. I can't pronounce these names.
Bjork
I had a whole other problem before. Whatever.
I love it.
It's challenging to listen to.
I'm
trying to keep it all straight.
It's hard to say. Yeah,
who now collaborates with what?
It doesn't matter. Don't worry about that. What you need to know is if these reports are true, Lisa Henson, according to the report, remains as a producer alongside Home Alone and Harry Potter director Chris Columbus, who also produced Nosferatu, I believe, for Eggers. Really? Yeah. Huh. And would star Alexander Skarsgård as the Jareth, the Goblin King. The role that Bowie played. And Bill Skarsgård.
Shoes to fill.
What's that?
Right?
Pants, right? You mean pants? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, well, yeah.
Awfully tight pants to fill? Is that what?
Well, both, yeah, certainly.
And maybe they're baggy.
Bill Skarsgård plays the vampire in the Nosferatu film right now. So this is a lot of folks that work together.
Cool.
I don't know. Quite honestly, Labyrinth was fine. I mean, do we need a new one? maybe it would be better.
Yeah, there's my double question. The first is there's a little bit of a blur in this article that it sometimes says it's in the world of, and sometimes it says a reboot. And you know my feelings on those. There's no need to reboot things that are fine.
Right.
Just do more in the world. It's like those TV shows we just talked about. Don't pretend the movie didn't exist and then do a TV show. The TV show is about the movie. If you're going to make another movie, do it about the other movie and continue the story or in the same world or something. But that being said, aside, might be irrelevant when you come down to Labyrinth is just one of those things. Does it need more exploration of its world? Is it going to make it better? Or the fact that it's so poetically esoteric and weird that I don't know what's going on is part of what makes it magical. You know, why do you want to, here's how he was able to juggle those 3 crystal balls in one hand. What? Don't show me how he did it. That's part of the magic. Oh, he has a special race. He has suction cups on his fingers. No, don't tell me that, you know.
Here's where he found each one of the balls. Right. And then finally he had 3.
Oh, no.
Right. It's a quest movie. Right? I'm worried that a reboot is one thing that I don't care for in general, but I'm worried that Labyrinth is something that does not need to be deeper explored, but it makes it less magical, I guess. I kind of said that already, but you know what I mean. I
don't think it needs to be done, but I'm always on board for anything to do with Muppets, puppets, with the Hensons. Sure.
Well, yeah.
So if it happens, I'm ready to be entertained. I'm fine with it. I'm okay without it too. So we'll just have to see what happens. I'm
not going to not watch it, and I'm not going to claim it ruins Labyrinth. I'm just saying.
Exactly, right. Yeah.
You could make an incredible movie that doesn't exist in the world of Labyrinth. It's just that feeling that you need it anchored in something to have a quick in with an audience to make that sequel money that we just talked about at the beginning of the show.
Now, just as a side note, I suppose, or maybe it's not a side note. Maybe it's what's the opposite of a side note? The main note, I guess?
Yes.
The front note? Maybe as a front note. I mentioned that book, Douglas Burton's book, The Heroine's Labyrinth. And one of the aspects of the Labyrinth, this concept, is that, you know, the hero has a linear journey, leaves home, fights a distant dragon, and returns home something. You know.
He's changed. He's more mature. He's accomplished something.
Will now be a better, you know, civil servant or person, you know, a member of society for it, better for it, the adventure. The Heroine's Labyrinth is not linear. It's more like a labyrinth. And one of the things that Douglas points out, which is just kind of mind-blowing, is how many stories that focus on women that have metaphorical labyrinths, sure, which often represent the constructs of society and expectations of society. But in some films, like this one, literal labyrinths.
Yes.
Just popped off in my head. Millie Bobby Brown just did that film called Damsel, where she was literally in this cavern in a labyrinth.
Right. Yeah.
And she was on this quest to anyway.
Oh my gosh.
Also mind-blowing is how many times we've said the word labyrinth on this episode.
Yeah.
Because of Shadow's Labyrinth and the Heroine's Labyrinth and now the movie Labyrinth and oh my God.
Very thematic this episode.
Yes.
Now I'm going to have to dub in at the beginning the secret word, so that we could all just scream throughout this whole show. But yeah, now
the rubber chicken falls when someone says labyrinth.
Oh yes, the secret word.
One of those times.
I won't go into all the archetypes. Listen to the interview; it's really cool. But as I was reading the book, this movie is so perfect for this analysis, including the fact that some of these movies some stories that feature labyrinths in these female-centric stories. The entrance to the maze is near home and hidden. You know, and again, Alice in Wonderland, Westworld.
Whereas the hero's labyrinth, he goes off on a journey.
Yes.
The woman's labyrinth tends to be a hidden place near home, I see.
Yes, and it's not a hero's labyrinth because it's linear. It's not a labyrinth. It's a
hero's journey.
Okay.
Right.
Journey.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah. Heroine's labyrinth, hero's journey.
Yeah, and along those lines, and I want to be kind to Robert Eggers because I think he's a great filmmaker, which was great. I saw Nosferatu, which was a good film. I think ultimately it fails for me. Maybe it's just because of the story, and I don't blame him because I think he was just trying to, faithfully adapt the 1922 silent film into a talkie, and in that he probably succeeded. And maybe even, he's made something even better.
I thought you were going to say because you don't believe in vampires.
That too. Bigfoot and vampires.
That's another theme.
Yeah.
Right. Among the things. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, if you don't know, I thought this is fascinating, right? So Nosferatu is this 1922 German silent film.
Which I've seen.
Okay. Oh, wow. We got to do a podcast about 1920s pop culture. Cal be an expert.
Probably.
We finally found a movie cat saw.
Yeah.
Someone call Ripley.
Yeah, fantastic. We can be done now. But I had always thought and heard that they made the movie, and it's Nosferatu. It's set in Germany, different country. It's all different character names, but it's the story of Dracula because they couldn't get the rights to Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out that might not be true.
Oh.
According to this gentleman who's a film historian, David Cowlett, he explained that the low-budget film was made by Germans for a German audience, and that explains all the variations, why they moved it to Germany, why they were German-named characters, and so forth. They weren't trying to avoid a copyright infringement lawsuit, which, by the way, they got from Stoker's heirs.
Anyway, okay.
Oops.
Yeah, and the ultimate judgment was, by the court, destroy all copies of the film. But much like the fabled vampire himself, the movie survived anyway. And of course, it's still available to watch today.
Yeah.
This movie's it seems like it's going to be a big success. They did this really kind of cool thing where they did sort of counter programming in Christmas and had it kind of like we talked about a few episodes ago about horror movies and joyous occasions.
Yeah.
And it worked. I saw it on the day after Christmas myself. So it's doing well at the box office. It's a great story. When I think about, though, Eggers doing Labyrinth, and we're talking about this idea that this heroine story where, like John was saying, it's metaphorical, it's, inside, it's kind of, you're not really sure what's going on, except she goes on a journey, or maybe doesn't. But by the end of the story, she is a changed person. And it may be an allegory entirely from just going from puberty to adulthood. But the way this Nosferatu ends, and I won't spoil it for you, it's just it's kind of a letdown. And again, maybe he was just adapting faithfully the silent film. Mm-hmm. But the silent film differs from Dracula in a significant way, which has to do with the ending, which again, I won't ruin. I guess my point is to say that I hope that maybe he needs to get some women involved. If it's going to be a story about a young person going through a journey, maybe he needs some women involved, because this story, the Nosferatu story, much like the Dracula story, has a woman at the center of the story. And it's got to be handled the right way. Otherwise, I think it comes across like a dude telling a woman's tale. That's kind of how I felt about the ending of Nosferatu.
So worth seeing, though, yeah? No.
Yeah, no. Absolutely.
Okay.
It wasn't until the end where I was like, oh, really? That's how this goes? Bill Skarsgård.
Love saves the day again? Bullshit.
You're not getting anything out of me.
John Fleary.
Just saying.
In a sense, if you've seen Bram Stoker's Dracula by Francis Ford Coppola, and now we're talking about something in the early 90s, so we're getting closer to the 80s.
Yeah.
It is kind of Love Saves the Day. And that one's supposedly a faithful adaptation of the book. Because Mina does at the end say, like, you know what? I love you, Dracula. I want to be with you forever. Turn me into a vampire. And stuff happens,
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm trying not to give anything away. Anyway,
that's okay.
I'll leave it the way I did. Maybe, Eggers has got to get a hold of Douglas's book. There you go.
Yeah. Send it to him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Get them together.
Yeah. Put them in the writer's room.
Yeah.
Brandon says Labyrinth needs to be left alone. It was great to start with. Yeah. And it's fine. I mean, come on.
Sure.
You don't mess with things that are fine. Marcus has come up with a new way for us to advertise this show by quoting Kat. It's challenging to listen to.
Oh, no.
Oh, you just put that on the poster. Put that on the. It's going to be the masthead of our website.
Put that in the press kit. Yeah.
Yeah, on top of our media kit. Challenging to listen to. Kat, co-host.
If you enjoy a challenge, you're going to love 1980s Now.
Right.
Incomprehensible doesn't even approach it.
Right.
It's like a labyrinth that you have to get through.
There you go, yeah.
There goes again.
Yeah. Do you find it's too easy to listen to your current podcast? Well, have we got a show for you? You won't understand any of this bullshit. The host can't pronounce North. What is it? Nordic names? I don't know. What's the word? Or larynx. Larynx.
1980s Now lives at the intersection of Bigfoot and cocaine bears.
The skunk ape.
True crime.
Don't forget about the skunk ape.
All right. Hey, that was the show. We do not have patchouli oil baked into us, so at the very least we can say.
So we can go in the comic shop. Good for us.
Yes, and our show does not smell.
It does not smell, and it is brought to you thanks in part to our early adopters, Rick
Also not
Parker,
smelly.
the non-smelly Rick Parker, and Karen Flieger.
Yay!
Yeah, who also gave us that first news item to talk about.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Rick.
Thank you, Rick. And thank you especially to our success level Patreon supporters. Tony.
Oh, that stunk cat.
The secret of our smell cess.
Smell sass. Tony Great, Matt Marino, John Henderson, Brandon Greer, Nick Guillory, and Marcus Taylor.
Yeah, and Marcus Taylor, who sent us that breaking news during the show.
Oh, yes. Wow.
This just in.
Yeah. Oh, hey,
On it.
look, these guys are fantastic. You can join them. Go to patreon.com/1980s now to help us keep this show afloat week after week. But if you can't do that, or even if you do that, please subscribe to us on all the various platforms that
Why
we are
not?
available.
It's free.
Yeah. And that little thing seriously tells a robot what to recommend to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't subscribe, you're letting the robots win because they just start picking whatever garbage they want.
Don't let the robots win.
Yeah, then they have
What we're
free
saying.
will. Tell them what to do.
Right. You know how Will feels about AI. We need to straighten this out right now.
Oh, yes.
Facebook, YouTube, all of the podcast platforms. And here's the thing. Go listen to us on Apple, subscribe. Then switch over to iHeartRadio. Subscribe there too. Go down the list. All right, hey. Join us for a live some Wednesday at 7 p.m.
free.
Eastern, where we record the show in front of a live streaming audience. All right. We will talk to you again next time on 1980s Now.
Until next time.
Labyrinth.
That's how I remember how to spell it. Labyrinth. If I don't think of it that way, I can't spell it right.
Mm-hmm.